So I will move this along ahead and say welcome to everybody to the BCMA webinar number 16. Already number 16. It's great to see this program going so strong. We are joined today for the Applying to the Museum Assistance Program, the Collections Management component. And I'd like to introduce people as we go along. So first off, my name is Ben Fast, and I am the Programs and Member Services Coordinator here at the BCMA. I'm here for the technical questions, so if you're having any trouble, just shoot me an email and I monitor that throughout the webinar. If you're having any trouble hearing or if you get kicked off, just send me a message and let me know. As we're going through this webinar, if you do have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A button. We can't hear you or see you, so you don't need to yell at your computer. Just type in a chat question and we will get to it. We'll read them out as well so that everybody can hear them. So that Q&A feature is either at the top or bottom of your screen. It's a little box with a Q in it, and you'll be ready to go. And we'll have questions sort of as we go through or towards the end as well. And before we get started, I do also want to give you a quick update on the BCMA 2018 conference. If you don't know already, we are meeting in Kelowna October 21 to 23rd at that beautiful hotel in the picture there. Regular registration is open now, and our full program is coming out next week, but I will tell you a secret that we actually have our full conference schedule available online right now. You can go to the website on the screen, museumsassn.bc.ca, or you can follow along with the hashtag BCMuseums to get access into that schedule. We have registration open there. We have some bursary options, including a brand new one for our Indigenous Cultural Competency Training Workshop, which happens just before conference. It's up to $2,600 that you could get there. And we have much more under the conferences tab as well, including our speakers and other information there. Now, speaking of speakers, for this month's webinar, I am excited to welcome back Colleen Craig and Michael Smith. They are both senior program advisors for the Department of Canadian Heritage and are both originally from Northern BC. So there's a fact about them. And I would like to welcome them to the webinar today. So welcome, Colleen and Michael.
Hello.
Hello. All right, so I think we click share screen at this point. And this should pull up our...
Yeah, we just share a screen and then select your window. That will get everything going. Perfect.
There we go.
Okay. All right, so I hope everyone is here because they're considering drafting an application for Museums Assistance Program, or MAP. We have multiple components, but a collections management component is the one we're talking about here today. So what we want to talk about is what would make a successful application to this program. So we'll go through a quick overview of MAP and the component in general, and then we'll look at the 3 different types of projects that we can consider under this component. And we will have room for questions at the end. So really what we want to get from is, this is my attempt at an inspirational sort of before and after of a lot of overcrowded collection storage rooms, but essentially our job is to get you from overcrowded, dense applications full of unnecessary clutter to that are not successful to this one, which is a successful application which is written in detailed but plain language and much more likely to result in success. So we're going to come back to that description there, but we're going to get into, oh, is it doing like an automatic change? Okay. So the birth of MAP, 1972. We're one of the oldest programs that we've delivered out of the regions. And so it came back into being when there was a different Trudeau in power. And MAP in some ways hasn't changed much over the years, and is still a pretty small program. There's only around $8 million nationally for funding special projects each year. And we usually have about $1 million for our region, which is split over around 40 projects per year. So MAP is delivered out of regional offices. So while the information I'm going to give today will be the same across Canada, make sure you connect with your closest regional office. But here in our region, it's myself, Colleen, and my colleague, Michael.
Hello.
And we serve Yukon, BC, and Alberta. And as Ben said, we actually both happen to be from Northern BC, although we've each lived around the province in various capacities. So MAP is a complicated program for its size. There's 7 different components and subcomponents, and they each support a really specific kind of project, and that's all we can do. And each has different eligibility, different application forms, different maximum amounts. But by far, the most common is requesting between $10,000 and $40,000. And generally speaking, the more money that is being requested, the more information we expect. So I'm not going to go through all of these today because we are focused on the collections management component. So collections management component, CM for short, is by far our most popular. This means it's our most competitive stream, which is why it's really great that you guys are on this call. So you can come in for 3 different kinds of projects, and that's it. So collections storage, collections management databases, and share best practices, which is professional development. We're going to go through each of these, but for the basics, so all the applications for this component are due November 1st. It's a once-a-year deadline, and you have to email it or mail it in by that day. It's important to know that November 1st is the deadline, but it's for project activities happening in our next federal fiscal year, April 1st to March 31st. You won't know if your project has been approved until usually around April. So people often, if you're really relying on the funds, you would plan to start your project in June or so, or if you need to know that you've got that funding secured. Basic eligibility. So this is an important one because this is, we're really stuck to this. So you have to be either a government or an incorporated not-for-profit with a mandate for heritage. The big one for a lot of folks is that you have to provide services year-round. So if you're a seasonal volunteer-run organization, you will not be eligible. But you don't have to be open year-round. You just have to provide services. So what that means is in the winter, if you have less hours or even no hours, but you post on your website that you're available for tours, if it's prearranged, that sort of thing, that you need to discuss with Michael or I, because it does depend on if you're more rural. We have more flexibility there. I mean, if you're in a larger city, we would be a bit tighter on these definitions. The other one is that you do need to have one full-time paid heritage professional, a full-time equivalent. So you could have 2 part-time people, but they need to be heritage professionals. They can't just be, retired school teacher or bookkeeper or that kind of thing. They really do need to be a heritage person. So basic ineligible expenses and revenues. Essentially, the crucial thing to remember is MAP can only support special one-off projects. We cannot fund activities that are considered to be regular, ongoing collections management work. In a collections management project, you're likely going to be doing some of those things. For example, you take a photo or scan an artifact or document when you're adding it to a new database, or doing a condition report before you rehouse the artifact in its new storage spot. But you just have to be careful not to include that time within what we consider the MAP project budget. And some activities like digitization used to be eligible under MAP, but the program has narrowed its focus, so we can no longer consider that. So collection storage solutions. This, out of the 3 types of projects, is by far the most popular, so we're going to spend a bit more time on that one. I actually lifted the photo from the BCMA website. This is Parksville, and it's a collection storage solution. There's a before and after. So that could be an eligible type of project. These are the kinds of costs that we can consider eligible. These are kind of the physical purchase costs. So essentially, it's minor capital assets, so the supplies for storing or handling. Is there any way you can turn that off?
Without.
Okay. Yeah. There's no pause button. I guess space there. Okay.
I have no idea.
Okay. Sorry about this, guys. And so this is generally what we target the MAP funds towards. And then generally, the other 50% of matching support is the sort of soft costs, the human time. So either it can be staff, or you can hire additional support. But this has to be paid professional heritage workers, so volunteer time is not eligible. But it's the personnel time spent specifically on eligible activities. We really encourage, even for these kinds of back-of-house projects, whenever you can find a way to have a little bit of outreach and try to interact with the community on your project, even if it's just writing a post to Facebook about, about your new storage, it is a strength within what we are looking for, in a way to kind of make yourself a little bit above the rest. Project evaluation is really often the weakest part of applications. People often have this way more complicated than it needs to be. Really keep it very simple, measurable, logical. Your output is just the most immediate result of the project. So in this case, the direct product or service delivered. So, you're buying 4 new shelving units. You're going to rehouse 500 artifacts onto those new shelves. And then you want an outcome, which is a medium or longer term result of the project. But it's not some far in the distance result. You want it to be linked to the project as closely as you can. So in this case, because you now will have museum grade storage in place, the artifacts are properly stored, it means the collection will be better preserved for future generations. And then you need an evaluation method. So the outputs and outcomes need to be measurable, and somebody needs to be in charge of measuring them. And that's usually the person that will complete a final report. So if you build in doing the evaluation throughout the project, then you'll have an easy time reporting on the final results. So this is the same project description from the beginning, just as an example. You can see here it's written in really detailed but plain language. When you're developing a project with us, you really need to be at the point where you can give a clear, short answers to these kinds of basic questions. Just, who are you? Why do you need to do the project? Why are you doing it now? And what are you actually going to be doing? When are you going to do it? And then what will you achieve? So we'll give a couple. There's 2 examples of storage solutions that we can give here of real. So we'll do this after each type of project. Real examples that we've funded within the last 1 to 3 years.
Okay, so this is my part here. So the first project that I think that we like to talk about is the Sunshine Coast Museum and Archives in Gibsons, which they received $3,309, which was 50% of the cost for their cold storage project to improve the care of their film-based collection. The project involved buying 2 freezers, archival storage supplies, and moving the films and related items into proper storage conditions. This project was strong, largely due to the prior work that they did. They had recently completed a collection condition review in which the film-based collection was shown to be in varying levels of deterioration, and therefore prioritized for storage upgrade. They then conducted research to determine the most effective method for long-term preservation of the collection, and selected the one that they felt was best for their situation. The critical moisture indicator packaging method, apparently. All this groundwork meant that they were able to speak clearly to why this particular collection needed to be focused on, why they were doing it now, and why they were doing it in this particular way. Another project that we helped out with was Quesnel Museum and Archives, who received just about $25,000, which is about 40% of the total eligible project cost, to buy various storage units, including compressed shelving, a map cabinet, rack for framed works, specific textile storage area with padded hangers and garment bags, and steel shelving, all of which replaced a variety of fixed shelving that they had acquired over the years. They were also able to hire a museum assistant to help with the project. The storage project is a part of a larger project to reorganize and reassess the museum's collection as part of the museum's strategic plan to make it more efficient use of their space. The museum is also looking to deaccession items unrelated to their mandate. While unfortunately not an eligible activity, having a deaccessioning policy and applying it is a strength within collection storage projects. The museum also shared news about the project on their social media, which resulted in a couple of community engagements. A local women's group booked a tour to see the changes and ended up making a donation of padded hangers. And the library contacted the museum to offer up copies of the local newspaper, which allowed the museum to complete their collection and finally have the space to store them.
So I just want to do a quick sidebar here and mention another program that Canadian Heritage delivers, the Canada Cultural Spaces Fund. There's a bit of overlap here between CCSF and MAP. So CCSF is usually for kind of larger projects, but it's also for specialized equipment and renos. And so if your organization is eligible for MAP, it will be eligible for Cultural Spaces. In fact, Cultural Spaces is a bit more flexible of a program, so if you're not quite eligible for MAP, you may still be eligible for Cultural Spaces. While MAP can consider support for minor capital, which we usually say is about equipment up to about $10,000 per item, and it has to be related to collection storage improvement. Cultural Spaces can consider larger projects and other kinds of equipment like HVAC systems, fire suppression, display cases, exhibition lighting, that kind of stuff. So there's a quick example of that one. A few years ago, the Salmon Arm Museum received $245,000 towards constructing a brand new museum building within their existing kind of Heritage Village site. It was just like a single building in the middle with some exhibition space, but also was going to house the office, archives, and storage spaces. So it was part of a larger, major redevelopment plan for the whole site. So we contributed to the construction of that new building. And then 2 years later, last year, they applied for MAP to outfit that new collection storage room with rolling and fixed shelving. And the museum and archival storage materials, and then to move the collection into that new space. And they received $42,000 through MAP towards that project. So the next type of project is databases. So we can only support museums that are purchasing a brand new collections management system or adding a significant upgrade to their existing system. Often people add like an online component or a digital assets management component towards the existing one. So under this component, you can come in for, so kind of the hard cost would be purchasing the new software. Sometimes there's the data migration costs are included within that. And then any hardware directly linked to supporting the new system. So maybe you want to buy another laptop so that you can use the database in the collection storage room, or you move it to multiple sites, that kind of thing. Sometimes people have put in a kiosk kind of in the main exhibition or lobby area, just so visitors can look into the collection system from there. And generally, this is what the MAP funds are targeted towards. And then, so the generally staff, or you can hire contract workers for implementing that new system into the database, sort of going through various testing to make sure it's all up and running correctly. And again, outreach time is something, if you can incorporate it into any kind of project, always does strengthen it from us, because we're really looking to how you're serving Canadians and trying to find ways to do so and involve them in the work that you do. And then, of course, project admin time, which is usually has to be with less than 15%, and generally is smaller for these types of projects. So here's a project description example for purchasing a database. Again, writing it in just clear language, following those simple steps of just who you are, what you're doing. That's what we're looking for once you have this stage set up, you're ready to get into more of the detail. And we have another 2 examples of recently completed collections management database projects.
One of the projects that we'd like to talk about is one that the Campbell River Museum and Archives did this year. They received $30,000 to purchase and implement a collections management database system. So in their project description and discussions with them, it came out that their current tracking system does not meet the museum needs, and the implementation of a new system will allow the museum to coalesce the two databases currently in use into one. The new system will provide a secure and accessible database for the museum to preserve collections information, including linking digital content to associated objects, improving record keeping of the First Nations collection, and providing more information to researchers and the general public. The further professionalization of this practice and staff training will ensure that the museum is able to maintain the long-term preservation of the collections and facilitate the creation of exhibits. The choice of the collections management system database was supported by the advice of the Canadian Heritage Information Network analyst and CHIN's collection management software criteria checklist, which we had also mentioned in this project description. One thing that I'd like to point out with this, we like to see that organizations are taking advantage of any tools that we know of or that we suggest, including such as the collections management software criteria checklist. It's a very excellent tool developed by the Canadian Heritage Information Network. And we actually have an analyst who works out of Victoria. And she's got a very good understanding of what systems are being used and of how to facilitate your institution's choice of what system to purchase. So we really highly recommend that you take advantage of those tools. The other project we'd like to mention is actually did not come through the collections management component because they're an Indigenous institution. They came through the Aboriginal Heritage component, but this is an aspect of a project that we would like to see under collections management. It's the Umista Cultural Center in Alert Bay, received support to improve their collections management system to better accept Kwakwala language and have fields for additional cultural information such as oral histories, songs, family connections, and places. So this is, I think, an important aspect to these projects, is that if you can update your system to give yourself more flexibility, to allow more information and different types of information to be attached to that, that's something that we can look at as well. Just to keep that in mind.
All right, so shared best practices. This is the third type of project that can be considered under the collections management component. It's the least common because you need to have 3 museums come together to apply, but essentially it's for developing and delivering professional development related to key museum functions. Costs that are eligible under this component are, renting the venue for the workshop or the presentation or symposium, any kind of, paper and supplies and things that you might need for delivering it. And then you can bring in folks to the presenters who are delivering the workshop. Unfortunately, travel and accommodation for the participants is not eligible, and the travel and accommodation has to adhere to the Government of Canada's travel guidelines, which are pretty strict and often less than you might think for travel. But that is eligible under our parameters. And so the eligible soft costs, like the human side, is really the staff, or you can hire somebody to assist with designing the workshops or the tools, promoting and marketing it, setting it up, taking it down. And then similarly, we like to see outreach about talking about what your museum is doing and letting the community know, both in kind of the museum community, but also your public. And then doing project administration of the supervision, bookkeeping, reporting, etc. And so this is the little description of Shared Best Practices project. So, and again, so we've got two recent examples of shared best practices.
So last year, the Vancouver Museum partnered with the Burnaby Village Museum, the Richmond Museum, and the Vancouver Maritime Museum to present a 2-day symposium on strategic collecting to explore contemporary issues and practices in collection management with focus on collecting practices that A, methodologically resonate with and further institutional mandates, and B, are more responsive to community expectations and interests. A publication will be produced to capture the key ideas and discussions and provide suggestions and guidelines. This was a strong project because the need for strategic collection planning has been clearly identified within the BC museum community. Deaccessioning is a major issue with many museums, and you can see that on the listservs. Struggling to balance continued collecting with limited storage space and staffing. Due to a lack of thoughtful and effective collecting strategy, museum staff are spread thin, processing and caring for large numbers of objects rather than focusing resources on preserving and interpreting artifacts that tell strong stories of Canadian history. Museum professionals are looking to move from reacting to these issues to proactively determining the best approach to acquisition while considering resources and relevancy. The Vancouver Museum is seen as a leader within Western Canada and has a thorough evaluation plan to follow up with learning from this symposium. The project will contribute to the sustainable future of museums and improve stewardship and access to collections. They received about $18,000, about 35% of the total eligible costs. Another interesting project that we had come through a couple of years ago, the Museum of Anthropology partnered with the Royal BC Museum and the Burnaby Village Museum to develop a workshop on salvage and disaster preparedness. This was in response to the significant disasters in BC that caused major damage and put collections at risk, including a fire at Umista Cultural Center and a flood at the Museum of Anthropology. In each case, museum professionals from neighboring communities stepped forward to help. Through their combined efforts, they were able to limit damage and start the process of stabilizing and repairing the collections. These incidents showed the importance of individual museums having plans in place, as well as a network of colleagues with the expertise to assist when a disaster strikes. These museums work together to create a workshop and protocols targeted to the particular disaster concerns of museums in Western Canada, namely fire, flooding, and earthquakes. To address the sector-wide gap in knowledge on earthquake preparedness for museums, the Museum of Anthropology will draw on research currently being done with the University's Structural Earthquake Engineering Facility to design storage solutions to mitigate seismic damage to artifacts. And they received about $20,000, about 43% of total eligible budget. Two great projects there.
So that is it from us. We really want to encourage everyone to, if you have an idea, when you're still at that idea stage, give us a call, talk through it with us, and we can guide you to what component might be the best fit, and also chat with you about how to craft the application and really focus in on the key areas for MAP, and also talk about the timing of what deadline to come in to. If you're able to work on your application well in advance of the deadline time, like at least a few weeks, we can review draft applications. So you can email that in and we can actually spend like an hour or so, go through all the questions with you. And that, if you do have the time to get that done well in advance, as I said, of the deadline, and have that review with us, it really helps get you through the next stage and ideally be successful in what you're requesting. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to leave time for questions. So I don't know if there are any, but Ben, are you back on?
Yeah, so I'm just going to share this. If everybody wants to use the Q&A button to submit the questions, it might take a couple minutes to type them all up, but you can submit your Q&A that way and we'll read them out. I have also added Colleen and Michael's emails to our follow-up email, which you'll be getting sometime either later today or early tomorrow. And so if you do have any questions that can't be answered here, feel free to email them as well there.
And I will just say again here, so our role as regional officers really is to try to help our region be successful through the national review and the event approval stage.
And do you want to maybe even outline what your region is? Because I know that we have a couple of people on from some different provinces as well.
Yeah, so Western region is BC, Yukon, and Alberta. So when you apply, that's who we receive all the applications from everyone. Michael and I both happen to be based here in the Vancouver office. We do have an office in Edmonton as well, but all of the MAP applications come down to the Vancouver office.
And so if we do have a couple of people signed on from Ontario, for example, where would you sort of recommend they go to seek some of this information in their region?
So every region does have a head office, so you would want to go through them. But they're welcome to contact Michael or I. We can put you in touch with a specific officer, but they're all program officers like us, like Michael and I. All the basic rules of eligibility are the same across the country. However, each region has priorities. So in our region, for example, we do prioritize smaller museums from more rural or remote communities, as well as Indigenous.
Okay.
So another way to get in touch with your regional program officer would be to go to the website, and it says there's a link in there to the regional offices.
Perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. So I do not see any questions coming in yet. So if anybody has any questions, please use the Q&A button. I know there's probably lots of questions out there. Maybe people are just typing up really long ones. But,
Well, and I do want to emphasize again that you're welcome to talk directly with Michael or I, but also feel free to talk with your colleagues. Many people have come in for very similar kinds of projects because, again, we only fund very specific things. And there is nothing wrong at all with going back to your colleagues to see what they may have done. And even when you say that you have done that, it actually looks good on you because it shows you've reached out to other colleagues to see how they've approached it and how much time they've spent in various aspects.
And they may be able to help you avoid any pitfalls that they have to go through. So.
Perfect. Related to that, Bronwyn has sent in a question. Can shared best practices funds include smaller institutions that may not have enough of those paid heritage staff or not full-time operations like the eligibility requirements for some of those other programs?
Yeah, so the lead applicant must be eligible. And again, by full-time, it's a full-time equivalent. So you can have one or more people and part-time that make up a full-time equivalent. We are flexible, as I said, with smaller institutions, but the intent here is that we do support the professional heritage community. That is what our limited funds are targeted towards, and that is the intent of our program. And you do need to have a minimum of 3 museums working together for that component. So you would have the one that is eligible be the applicant. And then if there is some that aren't quite there yet, then they can be part of the group, but you still need the lead applicant to meet the eligibility requirements. I just would say on that note though as well, you can also work with your a regional heritage network or perhaps the BCMA because they are the ones that serve the entire province and various scales and scopes of heritage organizations, and perhaps they would be the applicant for you and could link into design a workshop or an event for you that would meet your needs.
Always interested in partnering.
More work for you, Ben.
More work for me, yeah.
I didn't mention, but maybe I'll make a little plug in for the BCMA, which did receive funding through the Share Best Practices component to design a series of 3 workshops, I believe it is, and associated educational materials for topics that were of specific interest to small museums. And that could be something the BCMA continues going forward.
Definitely. Yeah, that should, some more information on that should be coming soon.
But I could say here though too, like in Alberta, for example, for whatever reason, does have stronger regional networks than BC does. And so they have, there's Carmen, which is a Central Alberta museums network. There's also like one in the west part of the province of Alberta that goes into northeastern BC in the Peace region. And those networks are also eligible to come in for shared best practices.
And sort of following up on that, what about partnerships outside of the province or potentially even outside of the country? How does that affect things like this funding?
Well, we definitely interprovincial is fantastic. But and you can do international, which usually means America. But America, typically though, the international costs are not eligible for us. So we would just look at the Canadian costs. Right. But that we can have you would definitely want to talk to us about that. So we can consider some, but again, it is a Government of Canada program for Canadian museums. So you would have to make a really strong argument about why you were bringing up an American museum consultant, for example, to present on something, or, so there can be a rationale for it, but you would have to really articulate that strongly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I still am waiting for a couple more questions out here. Thank you, Bronwyn, for yours, for taking the plunge and being our first question. I remember on your last webinar, Colleen and Michael, there was a lot of talk about how much is sort of presented on a one-on-one basis, or how much importance is on that one-on-one basis. Can you just touch on that again a little bit?
It is, I find it very important. I like to work with people one-on-one because I think that gives us an opportunity to learn more about them personally, their organization, and also what projects that they're interested in doing. And then we can also sit down and actually talk about a real project with real issues and get into some actual details rather than keeping it high level theoretical. And that way, that when somebody is actually getting to the point where they want to submit an application, they have a really good idea of how to apply our application process to their specific organization.
So get in touch.
Get in touch.
Pick up the phone and call. Tammy asked a question about whether or not she can get a copy of the presentation. Yes, Tammy, I have included it in the follow-up email, so you'll get it within a day or so. Probably later today or early tomorrow morning it'll go through. So look for that then.
If I could add, so for the little example project descriptions that I gave, I really try to keep them a bit, generic and vague for this, but specific enough. But definitely feel free to use that kind of language as well for when you develop your project. We really are looking for just the concrete specifics of the project. A common element that comes up in applications is people use a lot of descriptors or flourishing adjectives and that sort of thing. We're government, that all gets stripped out, and it really becomes just, you're buying 4 shelves, you're putting them in, you're rehousing artifacts. So just keep that in mind as well, is that we really kind of parse it down to the bare bones when we do the assessment of what your project is. And the more you can help with us and edit it down, the better off it is for both sides.
Yeah, we don't need to know that the new database is fabulous. We just need to know that it's going to fit your needs.
But it will be fabulous, I'm sure.
Well, we encourage all sorts of fabulousness, but
well, and I think for a lot of people too, I don't know if they realize how much you both get around the province and around the region. We've run into each other multiple times around at different places, and so you will be often coming and seeing those in place later anyways. And so it's great if you can sort of build that connection right from the very beginning, right through to when it's in place, and have that personal connection.
Yes, yeah, it'd be awesome.
All right, so I'm going to give 2 more minutes for questions, and Colleen and Michael and myself will just awkwardly chat until then.
I would like to point out that if anybody is going to review the presentation afterwards, to spend a little extra time, I think it's on slide 24 on the project description there. I think Colleen did a really good job of writing up a project that we would really like to see on how to encourage more temporary exhibits getting into the region. So If anybody would like to set up a shared best practices and then discussing some small local museums and how they can do that, that would be great.
That would be cool.
And just on that, so it has to be traveling exhibits, traveling temporary exhibits. So we can't fund exhibits that don't travel. So if you're creating but it could be a very small traveling exhibit, but it would be really nice to see more Western Canadian history exhibits travel, because it's quite rare. They often tend to be from Central Canada, and often are more fine arts rather than other elements of history. So it's definitely traveling exhibits that tell a Western Canadian story is a priority for us as well. It doesn't come up as often in the collections management component piece, but for the access to heritage component, which is to create and circulate exhibits, we would love to see more BC, Alberta, Yukon history being shared.
And that's no offense to our Belleville and Guelph participants on the webinar today, but
not at all. No, we do love to get those too.
Perfect. Well, I don't see any other questions that are coming through. So if you do have questions, like I said, I've included Colleen and Michael's email in the follow-up email, so you'll get that soon. Feel free to get in touch with them, ask questions, tell them about what you're applying for, get some help if you need it. It's a great way to sort of ensure the success, or hopefully ensure the success of your applications. I know that that's what we've done here at the BCMA, is worked really closely with Colleen and Michael, and it's been a great relationship that has been built up for that. So definitely include that. And just before we end, I do want to add a personal thank you. This is actually my last webinar. I've done 15 of these, but I am going to be heading out into a new position soon. So I want to thank you, and hopefully your image of me is just like David Hasselhoff pointing at this computer, that I've been that cool and that the computers have worked that well. So thank you very much to everybody. I do hope you join us next month. Next month's presenter will be John Hughes from right here in Victoria at Craig Darragh Castle. He's going to be exploring strategic plans, their importance and their limitations. And I think it's important that we explore both topics, both sides of that. And we do still have some spots ready for 2019 and one for November 2018. So if you want to be as cool as Colleen and Michael, then please jump on our website, submit your proposal, and become a BCMA webinar host as well. So we do have a follow-up survey coming up in your inboxes soon, as well as their presentation and their contact information for this webinar. So please do fill that out. We really appreciate the help with that. Helps going forward, getting some good content like this webinar. So if there's any other questions, feel free to shoot me an email or get in touch with Colleen and Michael. And with that, I hope everybody has a great lunchtime, and thank you very much, Michael and Colleen.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for all your hard work in putting these together. It's been great.
Well, thanks a lot. Have a good day, everybody.
See you soon.